I go around the country and people will say, Pete, you just don't understand why we're so mad about the 51st state. It's kind of like, yeah, you're right, I don't, okay?
Well,
And then I read, all I can say is to my Canadian friends is, you don't understand, because I read the media and I listen to other discussions, the president got mad about an ad.
Attention, friends. Something incredible is happening right now in the North American political arena. And this story could radically change not only the fate of Canada, but also the entire geopolitics of the United States. The Canadian government has just taken the boldest and most daring step in decades, bypassing traditional diplomatic channels and striking directly at the most sensitive point of the current president of the United States. It wasn't just loud talk behind the scenes. Canada launched an advertising campaign that literally forced the official U.S. ambassador to Canada to issue an extraordinary warning. Don't do that again. Imagine, in an era when the world has become accustomed to silent mutual tolerance and quiet bilateral negotiations, Canada has chosen the path of public conflict and has done so through powerful advertising campaigns in key U.S. states aimed directly at Donald Trump's voters. Why was this a diplomatic disaster? Because the trade war that had flared up between the two countries had reached a new level, and now it was no longer just an economic dispute, but a real political battle for the hearts of Americans. President Trump, who is pursuing his America First policy for the second time, has imposed harsh tariffs on Canadian goods, covering almost all key industries, from steel and aluminum to energy resources. But the province of Ontario has been hit the hardest, with its president vowing to protect its factories and jobs, even threatening one of the largest car companies with a refusal to provide assistance after it decided to move production to the U.S. due to trade uncertainty and ongoing tariffs. Amid this chaos, Canada is not just defending itself, it is preparing a new economic course. Under the leadership of the new Prime Minister, policy is changing before our eyes. Diversification of trading partners, new agreements in Asia, and the quiet but powerful construction of its own economic independence. At the same time, caution and patience are combined with strong signals that Canada will no longer bow to external pressure without a fight. But why is the U.S. ambassador so concerned about these commercials? Because they strike at the most vulnerable, Trump's electorate, destroying the carefully crafted presidential image and showing Americans how tariffs actually make their lives cheaper. It's a below-the-belt blow, and Washington, for the first time in a long time, is nervous. Irritation and fear permeate official statements because no one expected Canada to take such a public stand. Meanwhile, in Ontario and across Canada, there is a growing awareness that dependence on the U.S. is no longer necessary. During recent Asian summits, the Canadian delegation led the dialogue on key economic development issues, demonstrating the strength and maturity of its new foreign policy. This is the beginning of a new era, an era in which Canada is no longer a follower, but an independent player on the world stage. In this video, we'll tell you how one province made Trump tremble, why the Washington-Ottawa negotiations have stalled, and what hidden trump cards Canada has in this complex game. Hear about the rift in the automotive industry, why Trump's investments may not materialize, and why Taiwan and South Korea are viewing American politics with increasing concern. Don't miss the exclusive details and unexpected facts that were left out of the official press releases. You'll learn how Canada is changing the rules of the game and what this transformation means for the future of the continent. Politics, economics, a real battle for the future. It all started with one advertising campaign and an embassy warning. Ready to find out what's behind the scenes of the trade wars? Then dive with us into the hottest events of North American political drama. It's time to open your eyes to a new Canada, strong, determined, and ready to fight for its place in the world. Buckle up. It's going to be a real thrill ride. In recent months, the North American political scene has been experiencing the effects of an unexpected storm that seems to be only gaining momentum. Canada, a country that traditionally avoids high-profile conflicts with the U.S., has taken a bold and even provocative step in the trade war with Washington. It all started with a large-scale advertising campaign launched by the Ontario provincial government, a campaign worth nearly $75 million that was aimed directly at the hearts of American voters in key U.S. states. The main message of the ad was the accusation that Donald Trump's tariffs are damaging not only the Canadian economy, but also the American economy, destroying jobs and raising prices for ordinary Americans. The use of archival footage of former President Ronald Reagan calling for free trade only reinforced the emotional component of the ad. This move came as a real surprise to the White House. President Donald Trump reacted sharply just a few days after the ad was released. He announced the termination of all trade negotiations with Canada and the introduction of additional 10% tariffs. In a statement on social media, Trump called the ad fake and accused Canada of attempting to interfere in U.S. domestic politics, saying that it was trying to influence the upcoming elections and court proceedings on his tariffs. The moment was so dramatic that even U.S. Ambassador to Canada Pete Hoekstra issued an unusually sharp warning. Canada should think seriously about whether it should interfere in the U.S. elections through such provocative actions. He stressed that there had never been a precedent for this in U.S. history. It was not just a diplomatic protest, but a frank admission that Canada had hit a nerve with Trump and his voters. This whole conflict unfolded against the backdrop of long-standing trade tensions between the two countries. Donald Trump, adhering to his tough America First policy for a second consecutive term, imposed unprecedented tariffs on Canadian goods, 25% on most products and 10% on energy resources. These measures effectively hampered deliveries between the countries, raised prices, and forced Canadian companies to take a defensive stance. The process went beyond mere economic sanctions. A real crisis of trust and mutual dissatisfaction began, which could not remain silent. Against this backdrop, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who came to power in early 2025, demonstrated a strategic approach. Instead of panicking, Carney launched a large-scale program of countermeasures, including a $38.9 billion counter-discount package and active strengthening of trade ties with Asian countries. He publicly stated that the current period was an opportunity for Canada to break its economic dependence on the U.S. and build a new, more independent and sustainable economy. This line of government policy has become particularly noticeable in the context of Canada's active participation in Asian economic forums, where the country now acts as one of the key players with its own voice and independent interests. However, it was Ontario's advertising campaign that brought the political confrontation to a new level. For the first time in many years, Canada effectively bypassed diplomatic rules. Instead of quiet negotiations and tacit concessions, there was a public denunciation of Trump's policies in the heart of the United States, addressed to his voters. This move was a painful signal to the Trump administration, which could not ignore such a large-scale and direct challenge to its image. Ambassador Hoekstra publicly acknowledged that Canada had played on the president's most vulnerable string, his electoral support, to which he has always been extremely sensitive. In this context, it is impossible not to note the paradoxical drama within Canada itself. On the one hand, Ontario provincial leader Doug Ford supported the advertising initiative, saying that it had caused several Republicans to change their positions and vote against the tariffs. On the other hand, the federal government, led by Carney, is balancing between tough action and diplomatic restraint, preferring not to exacerbate conflicts until the next round of trade negotiations and court decisions in the U.S. This reflects differences in approach to economic struggle, from open defiance to a long wait-and-see strategy. As a result, Ontario's advertisement, which at first glance seemed like a bold political move, turned into real turbulence in relations between the two neighbors. It showed that Canada is ready to use new instruments of influence and is no longer afraid to directly challenge its powerful neighbor. And this is only the beginning of a major economic and political transformation that will affect not only Canada and the U.S., but also the entire global order of trade and diplomacy in the region. This story is about how one province and one commercial can shake the foundations of a superpower and set the tone for new relations for years to come. After Ontario's advertising campaign exposing Donald Trump's tariff policy became public knowledge and provoked a stormy reaction from the U.S. administration, the situation began to take an even more complex and tense turn. In the previous context, we saw how this move destroyed the usual model of diplomacy between Canada and the U.S., threatening not only trade relations, but also the balance of political power itself. But the strategic significance of this step is much deeper. Canada has gained a real instrument of influence that allows it not only to parry blows, but also to deliver targeted and painful blows to the Trump administration. The key point here is that these advertising appeals were not directed at official channels in Washington, but directly at American voters. This unexpected action gave the impression that Canada had crossed the line of traditional diplomacy and was now campaigning in the heart of the U.S. president's electorate. This strategic workaround caused real panic in the White House and among allies. A well-known CBC analyst noted that this was the first time an external actor had so clearly and effectively influenced U.S. domestic politics, making Trump feel vulnerable. Unsurprisingly, Ambassador Pete Hoekstra publicly accused Canada of unacceptable interference and called so insistently for an end to such actions that many experts saw it as an admission of the existence of real influence. But the drama does not end there. While the world's attention was focused on the U.S. reaction, a much more significant transformation was unfolding in Ottawa and Toronto. The Canadian government, led by Mark Carney, viewed the crisis not only as a problem, but also as an opportunity. In interviews with media sources that recently appeared, it was reported that one of Canada's trade advisors suggested using the wave that had arisen for a new foreign economic strategy that would be based not on dependence on the U.S., but on actively promoting Canada as a reliable partner in the international arena, primarily in the Asian region. The response has been powerful steps to strengthen economic diversification, including accelerating trade agreements with key Asian countries such as South Korea, Japan, Malaysia, and Singapore. Mark Carney makes no secret of the fact that he sees this as a way to bring Canada out of a state of unilateral dependence that made it vulnerable to tariff wars and political pressure. At one of the Asian Economic Forums, Carney stated that Canada offers a path of cooperation without political conditions, and which has earned the respect of many partners tired of global conflicts and unilateral sanctions. Moreover, the Canadian delegation not only attended, but also actively participated in the negotiations, symbolizing a new level of international influence. But most importantly, this new approach is based on Canada's reputation as a reliable, consistent, and predictable partner. Economists and international observers note that reputation is the new currency in global trade today, and Canada, as a country with transparent rules and a stable political system, is successfully accumulating it. This allows it to compete effectively and not on size, but on the weight of its words and responsibility. Unlike the loud and often unstable political statements of the United States, Canada offers stability and long-term projects that give investors confidence. According to official statistics published by the Canadian Department of Trade, the volume of mutual trade with the Asia-Pacific region has grown by 15% over the last 3 quarters, and this trend is only gaining momentum. This reversal is particularly important against the backdrop of growing pressure from the U.S. and the accumulated disagreements described in previous sections. Canada is betting on soft power and economic diplomacy, while the U.S. administration continues to insist on a policy of protectionism and unilateral sanctions. Experts emphasize that this balance could lead to the development of another large-scale competitive arena, alongside the trade war, the battle for the trust of the global business community and regional allies. Historians and economists are already comparing the current situation to the changes in world trade that occurred at the end of the 20th century, but say that the current shift is less chaotic. Canada intends to become a bastion of stability and predictability amid a volatile geopolitical situation. In a recent interview with a leading business channel, Mark Carney noted that the image of a country that always keeps its promises increases not only its economic, but also its political power.